This is the China Depth. Today is February 7, 2023. This article is from Foreign Policy. Xi Jinping's power grab is paying off. Xi Jinping was seen as an unassailable force until recently, but widespread protests and a reversal of his COVID policy have changed that. The 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party was a watershed event for Chinese politics, with Xi being elected for a third term and his allies occupying the Politburo Standing Committee and Politburo. Xi's report to the opening session of the Congress outlined his vision for the country's future, with an emphasis on political control, economic statism, and global influence. The selection of a completely Xi-allied PSC and Politburo was unexpected, as most analysts assumed some senior leaders and moderates from other factions would be retained. An amendment to the party's constitution was also added, mandating loyalty to Xi's leadership. This shows Xi's maneuvering of people, processes, and institutions to maximize his ability to rule for life. Despite current policy errors and economic headwinds, Xi's progress in strengthening his position through the 20th Party Congress gives him a strong political base. This could help him overcome any external and internal threats to his authority. All of this suggests Xi remains a formidable force in Chinese politics. At the recent CCP Congress and plenum, Xi Jinping emerged with an unprecedented grip on the party. He swept all 7 positions on the Politburo Standing Committee, PSC, and increased his majority of loyalists on the 24-member Politburo to over 80%. His control of selection processes for top party bodies has enabled him to appoint allies to key positions. The pre-Congress process involved conversation and investigation with senior cadres, putting political standards first and promoting firm supporters of Xi's leadership. This time, Xi only interviewed 30 leaders, not consulting with party elders or national government leaders without top party positions. The selection process and resulting appointments demonstrate the importance placed on party leadership bodies and political weakness of old factional networks tied to ex-leaders Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. Xi Jinping now has an unprecedented grip on the Chinese Communist Party. Xi Jinping broke many political norms in order to gain power and dominance, including not following the retirement age of 68, keeping Zhang Youxia and Wang Yi in their positions, and forcing Li Keqiang and Wang Yang to retire early. Hu Qinhua, the last senior leader associated with the Communist Youth League, was demoted, ending any power-sharing norms. The incoming Politburo was the first since 1992 without a single female member. Xi prioritizes political loyalty over norms, governance experience, and policy expertise. Li Keqiang was elevated to premier in March, despite not having any prior central government experience. Some optimists say he is pro-business, but this was said of Xi a decade ago too. Xi has broken many norms to gain power and dominance, prioritizing political loyalty over other factors. Li Keqiang was appointed premier without any experience in the central government. Optimists believe he is pro-business, though this was said of Xi too. Xi's new era of maximum Xi heightens political risk due to his powerful influence on policymaking, which can lead to sudden shifts in direction. Xi's loyalists have less experience in national or provincial leadership roles than their predecessors. Xi's stronger control could lead to better policy implementation, but it is dependent on the quality of his policies, which appear to be committed to his long-standing political agenda. China is currently facing the difficult task of transitioning from frequent COVID lockdowns to the virus spreading throughout the population. Beijing is taking constructive efforts to reduce pressures on the economy. If growth rate recovers to pre-COVID levels and there is little incentive from Washington to adopt less confrontational tactics, Xi Jinping is likely to return to a more interventionist regulatory policy and a more assertive foreign policy. Xi Jinping believes that seeking security through struggle leads to survival, while seeking security through compromise leads to death. He also believes that seeking development through struggle leads to flourishing, while seeking development through compromise leads to decline. China is facing a difficult time due to the COVID pandemic, and Beijing is taking steps to reduce pressures on the economy. Xi Jinping believes that seeking security and development through struggle is the best way to succeed, while compromise will lead to decline. He is likely to return to a more interventionist regulatory policy and a more assertive foreign policy if the growth rate recovers to pre-COVID levels. The Central Committee is the CCP's highest leading body, with the power to make decisions on major national policies. The new 376-member 20th Central Committee includes 205 full members and 171 non-voting alternate members. She personally directed the gatekeeping of selections to the Central Committee. The turnover rate of 65.4% is much higher than rates of 48.9% in 2012 and 49.3% in 2007, before Xi's leadership. The average age of members also inched up to 57.2 years old from 57 in 2017 and 56.1 in 2012. The Central Committee is the CCP's highest leading body. Xi personally directed the gatekeeping of selections to the Central Committee. Turnover rate of 65.4% is much higher than before Xi's leadership. Average age of members inched up to 57.2 years old. Xi Jinping promoted inexperienced allies to top positions and cultivated political loyalty of policy experts. He selected the most educated committee ever, with 49.5% technocrats and 7.7% STEM scholars. Female representation increased to 8.8%, but ethnic minority representation fell to 8.5%. Preference was given to officials who had focused on poverty alleviation, cross-regional development, environmental protection, responding to US-led sanctions and overcoming tech choke points, and upholding party leadership and upgrading value chains. Cadres wishing to advance in Xi's China should prioritize these objectives to have the best chance at success. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has its own constitution distinct from the state constitution of the People's Republic of China. This constitution outlines the CCP's principles, activities, and structures and provides a system of intra-party regulations. Xi Jinping is expanding and rewriting the system to improve his ability to govern the party and the country. Last year's amendments to the party constitution strengthened Xi's personal rule. Party members are now obliged to implement the two upholds, support for Xi's core position in the Party Central Committee and support for the Central Committee's authority and unified leadership. This mandate is a further step by Xi in entrenching his position by formally equating opposition to his leadership with opposition to the party itself. The lead-up to the party congress was dominated by the two establishments of establishing Xi as the party's core and his thought as the guiding position, but these did not make it into the party's updated constitution. Party watchers were looking for phrases that would place Xi on par with Mao, such as Xi Jinping thought, people's leader, and helmsman, but none of these were included. Some believe this shows resistance to Xi's leadership, but it is premature to draw this conclusion. The Q&A with an anonymous leading cadre from the 20th Party Congress Secretariat explains that the two upholds will help members understand the significance of the two establishments. Xi may not have been enshrined as the people's leader in the constitution because he himself may believe it inappropriate to equate himself with Mao. Paragraph 1. The political report to the 20th Party Congress is an authoritative statement of the party's current worldview and policy priorities. It signals continuity in Xi's personal leadership and policy agenda and suggests that Xi will keep pushing China in a more authoritarian, statist, and nationalist direction. The Chinese economy will have a stronger party role, with board seats in major firms and guiding capital towards favored sectors. The political report introduced systems thinking as part of Xi's ideology, with economic, political, and social reforms requiring adjustment of a balance of interests. China's increasingly complex policy issues need enhanced party oversight and more government systems to manage all aspects of the country's development. Overall, the political report to the 20th Party Congress signals continuity in Xi's personal leadership and policy agenda, with the Chinese economy having a stronger party role and systems thinking being introduced as part of Xi's ideology. This suggests that Xi will continue to push China in a more authoritarian, statist, and nationalist direction in the coming years and even decades. Xi Jinping wants to increase party control to counter increasing threats. China is now in a period of strategic opportunity coexisting with risks and challenges. There is a need to prepare for both unexpected crises and foreseeable threats. The 2022 Political Report contains a new section devoted to national security. Xi's report calls for stronger party leadership, people-centered policymaking, and a spirit of struggle. There is a focus on science, education, and human capital to bolster domestic innovation. The report aims to balance economic growth with national security. It seeks to address the political risks of lagging productivity growth and Western chokeholds on key technologies. This report is intended to help China become a global superpower. Xi Jinping's report identified new growth drivers: AI, IT, biotech, green industries, high-end manufacturing, renewable energy, and new industrial materials, but was notably less enthusiastic about markets, openness, and supply-side structural reform. The party is tasked with high-quality development, which includes boosting domestic demand and homegrown technology while increasing global reliance on Chinese supply chains. The party is also expanding oversight of the private sector by strengthening party building in non-state firms and improving corporate governance of financial firms and of private wealth. The report is preparing China for long-term strategic competition with the United States. She wants China to lead the world in comprehensive national power and international influence by the centenary of the People's Republic in 2049. The party is aiming to achieve modernization by mid-century and reject democratic politics, individual freedoms, and U.S. leadership in global governance. A new phrase, "resolving the Taiwan question is for the Chinese people themselves to decide," portends more assertive pushback against U.S. and allied efforts to support Taiwan. China will actively participate in global human rights governance and the formulation of global security rules. The report did not change Taiwan policy, but suggests a more assertive stance in the future. The most dramatic moment of the Party Congress was the exit of former leader Hu Jintao. Speculation was that he was forcibly removed or humiliated, but no confirmation has been found. Xinhua's English-language Twitter account said Hu was not feeling well and went to a room next to the meeting venue for a rest. Hu's reappearance at a ceremony and presence on a list of retired comrades suggests the exit was not an orchestrated purge. It is unclear what happened. Educated guesses are made in the absence of reliable information. Hu's age and known infirmity make a health event plausible, but Xi's obsession with control, perception, and process makes it unlikely that he planned a disruptive display of disunity. Xi Jinping's third term and refusal to anoint a political heir suggest he may plan to rule for life. His consolidation of power at the 20th Party Congress suggests he has the political capital to do so. He drew a parallel between himself and Mao Zedong's consolidation of power in 1945. Xi's succession is a gray rhino political risk for China, unknown when, how, and what comes next. Allies may begin jockeying for succession, leading to policy confusion, economic stasis, or even political chaos. Xi's refusal to anoint a political heir suggests he may plan to rule for life. His consolidation of power at the 20th Party Congress suggests he has the political capital to do so. His succession is a gray rhino political risk for China, with potential for policy confusion, economic stasis, or even political chaos. Next article is from Politico. What happens to Europe when the balloon goes up? The Chinese spy balloon has caused a fresh crisis in US-China relations. EU leaders now face pressure from the US to pick sides and join forces against China. Russia is preparing a major offensive in Ukraine, and the balloon incident risks distracting the US from supporting Kyiv. EU leaders were hoping for a thaw in relations with Beijing. The balloon incident has created a difficult start to 2023. The US pressuring EU leaders to join forces against China is concerning. The incident has created a fresh crisis in US-China relations. This puts EU leaders in an awkward position of being pressured by the US to pick sides. Russia's major offensive in Ukraine is concerning, and the incident has the potential to distract the US from supporting Kyiv. The U.S. shot down a Chinese surveillance balloon off the coast of South Carolina with an air-to-air missile from an F-22 stealth fighter jet. Secretary of State Antony Blinken indefinitely postponed a visit to Beijing. Images of the incident have circulated on social media. Beijing insists that the object was a civilian airship and protested against the use of force by the U.S. U.S. foreign policy is heavily invested in supporting Ukraine militarily, but may be distracted by the sharpening clashes with Beijing. Right-wing U.S. politicians have been calling for more attention on China since Russia invaded Ukraine a year ago. The Chinese government expressed strong dissatisfaction and reserved the right to take further necessary responses to the missile strike. The incident has highlighted the escalating tensions between the U.S. and China. It remains to be seen how the U.S. will respond to the Chinese government's protests. The U.S.-China rivalry is intensifying, putting pressure on Europeans to take a side. Europe's security and defense ultimately depends on the U.S. umbrella. Russia is expected to launch major offensives in the near future. Washington is preoccupied with Beijing, leaving the EU with few resources to address the Russia issue. Europeans must choose a side in the U.S.-China rivalry. The EU is struggling to address the Russia issue due to U.S. preoccupation with Beijing. The U.S.-China relations have become strained due to recent events, which puts Europe in a difficult situation as they have been preparing to re-engage with Beijing. Josep Borrell, the EU's foreign policy chief, is planning a trip to Beijing in April, while French President Emmanuel Macron is also planning to meet President Xi Jinping in the Chinese capital. The latest U.S.-China flare-up makes it difficult to know how Beijing will react to the planned trips, which could be used as a propaganda success to split up transatlantic ties. Relations between Europe and the U.S. are losing steam as Washington increases pressure on Beijing, while Brussels, Berlin and Paris show new hesitancy. U.S.-China relations have become strained, making it difficult to predict how Beijing will react to Europe's plans to re-engage with them. Transatlantic ties are in danger of being split up if the trips to Beijing are used as a propaganda success by China. Relations between Europe and the U.S. are weakening as Washington increases pressure on Beijing and Europe shows hesitancy. Beijing has been accused of aiding Moscow militarily in the war in Ukraine, providing dual-use goods such as navigation equipment, jamming technology and fighter jet parts. European leaders have warned Beijing not to aid Moscow, and China's top foreign policy official, Wang Yi, has dropped a plan to visit Brussels as a result. Europe's reaction to the balloon incident was muted, merely noting the US's right to defend its airspace. Few European countries supported the Biden administration's decision to shoot down a Chinese drone publicly, except for Estonia. Canada and South Korea showed strong support for the action, while the UK called for concern over Chinese threats. The EU's foreign policy in 2023 may be determined by the expiration of European indecision over China or America's appetite for providing Europe's defense. Next article is from South China Morning Post. Much ado about a big white balloon. The U.S. government claimed that a Chinese balloon was an intelligence-gathering device, and an F-22 fighter jet was deployed to shoot it down. Whether the balloon was used for spying or whether research is unclear, but the incident highlights the strained relations between the two countries. The U.S. Secretary of State's visit to China has been postponed without a rescheduled date. U.S. use of force deemed an overreaction by Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. U.S. has imposed sanctions and blacklisted Chinese officials and companies since Trump's presidency. High-level rituals have become glorified photo ops. U.S. provocations since Blinken's trip have been deliberate and frequent. Context of balloon farce must be considered. U.S. provocations have been deliberate and frequent since Blinken's trip. U.S. use of force considered an overreaction by Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. USS Chancellorsville sailed into the South China Sea to exercise the freedom of navigation. White House approved $10 billion weapons sale to Taiwan. U.S. Congress established new House Select Committee on China, first of its kind targeting another country. U.S. actions in response to China's increasing influence in the region. U.S. attempts to push back against China's growing power. U.S. actions have increased tensions between the two countries. China should consider U.S. actions as a badge of honor. U.S. actions demonstrate its commitment to freedom of navigation in the South China Sea. The U.S. has been trying to expand its military presence in the Pacific region, with the sole purpose of targeting China. The Pentagon is expanding a base in Guam and acquiring 4 others in the Philippines. Meanwhile, Beijing responded by sending a white Chinese balloon, which U.S. politicians have feigned outrage over. Washington's current stance is one of antagonism and hostility, which makes it difficult for the two countries to hold productive meetings. Beijing can send whatever signal it wants, but it will be either ignored or exaggerated by Washington. Next article is from New York Times. In China's COVID fog, deaths of scholars offer a clue. New York Times examined the obituaries published over the past 4 years by the Chinese Academy of Engineering and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. The spike in obituaries late last year coincided with the coronavirus's rapid spread across the country. This occurred despite China's strict zero-COVID policy of lockdowns and mass testing. After the government abandoned the policy in early December, cases soared and the number of obituaries increased, indicating a significant number of members of the academies were affected by the virus. When COVID restrictions were lifted in China, hospitals were overwhelmed and funeral homes had difficulty handling the bodies. Despite this, the government reported only a few dozen deaths, which caused criticism of their lack of transparency. More data has been released in recent weeks, including a reported 80,000 deaths. However, experts believe this is an undercount, as it only accounts for those who died in hospitals, potentially leading to an estimated 1 million deaths in the months ahead. COVID testing has been largely abandoned in hospitals, making it difficult to determine an accurate death toll. Dr. Jean from the University of Hong Kong believes it is the government's job to provide accurate information, but they are not doing their job. The deceased included molecular biologists, nuclear physicists, and experts in agricultural chemistry. One Academy member, Ma Zhenzhang, 86, was a wildlife scientist who specialized in Siberian tigers. He helped establish the country's only college for wildlife and nature reserves, and led groups including the China Zoological Society and the China Wildlife Conservation Association. Reached by phone, a relative of Professor Ma said that she did not know whether he had contracted COVID, because he had not been tested. He had other underlying diseases, she added. To the outside world, he may be someone with great achievements or influence, the relative, Fu Kun, said. To our family, he was more important as a sort of spiritual leader. We all respected him very much. The data drawn from the obituaries are far from conclusive. The institutions also did not answer questions about whether the obituaries, both during the outbreak and before, were exhaustive of all scholars who had died. From 2019 to 2021, the Harbin Institute of Technology had between 1 and 3 obituaries for professors and staff members published in December and January. This number significantly increased to 29 deaths between December 2020 and January 2021. Peking University, one of China's most prestigious universities, also had obituaries published for their staff and professors. Those who passed away included Luo Xiaochun, 68, former director of the Library for the Foreign Languages Department, Zhao Binghua, 91, founder of Peking University's nursing school, and Guo Xiliang, 93, a linguist who had continued publishing books on ancient Chinese phonetics into his 90s. There has been a large spike in obituaries for professors and staff members from top universities in China between December 2020 and January 2021. Those who passed away included people of different ages and backgrounds, such as a former library director, a nursing school founder, and a linguist. Professor Guo, a professor at Peking University, died from the coronavirus. In December, both Peking University and Tsinghua University issued notices urging greater protection for retired faculty and staff. Chinese health officials have said that the outbreak has peaked and is steadily declining. However, underlying issues in the health system such as less effective vaccines and insufficient hospital beds still remain unaddressed. Professor Jean from Hong Kong commented that even if there are small spikes in the future, more people will still die if the lessons of the outbreak are not learned. Chinese health officials have said that the outbreak has peaked and is steadily declining, but underlying issues in the Chinese health system still remain unaddressed. Professor Jean commented that if the lessons of the outbreak are not learned, more people will still die in the future. Next article is from Financial Times. Disney cuts Simpsons episode with China labor camp reference in Hong Kong. Disney has removed an episode of The Simpsons from their streaming platform in Hong Kong that referred to forced labor camps in China. This is the second episode to be removed from the service, the first being one that made reference to the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. The episode was produced by Disney-owned 20th Television Animation. Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law on the city in 2020, which bans broadly defined crimes. The episode was removed from the streaming platform in Hong Kong as part of a clampdown on political opposition and civil society. This is the second episode to be removed from the service due to content that is deemed inappropriate by the Chinese government. The latest Simpsons episode, One Angry Lisa, featured a scene that made reference to China's human rights abuses, including forced labor and detention camps. China has faced allegations of abuses against the Uyghur people and other mostly Muslim minorities in the Xinjiang region, which the UN has described as crimes against humanity. Kenny Ng, associate professor at the Academy of Film at Hong Kong Baptist University, believes that Disney may have removed the episode out of concern for its business in mainland China. Disney was accused of self-censorship in 2021 when an episode from The Simpsons, which satirized Beijing's repression of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, was removed from its Disney Plus streaming platform in Hong Kong. The episode featured a visit to Tiananmen Square, with a sign saying, "On this site, in 1989, nothing happened," and Homer Simpson calling former Chinese Communist Party chair Mao Zedong a "little angel" who killed millions. The move had more to do with the company's ties, current and future, in mainland China. In response to a request for comment, the Hong Kong government said a film censorship regime introduced in 2021, which forbids films from endangering national security, does not apply to streaming services. A spokesperson did not comment on whether the government had approached Disney to remove the episode. Disney declined to comment. This month, Disney will screen 2 Marvel films in China, the first to receive approval for distribution in the mainland market since 2019. Disney also drew criticism in 2020 for filming scenes of its $200 million live-action remake of Mulan in Xinjiang. The next article is from South China Morning Post. C919, what is China's homegrown passenger jet and can it compete with aviation giants Airbus, Boeing? The C919 is a narrow-body passenger jet built by the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, COMAC, to compete with Boeing's 737 and Airbus A320. The C919 made its maiden test flight in 2017 and was certified to fly by the Civil Aviation Administration of China, CAAC, in September 2020. COMAC delivered the first C919 jet to China Eastern Airlines in Shanghai in December 2020. It is designed to carry between 158 and 192 passengers. China Eastern Airlines ordered 4 C919 aircrafts in May at a cost of $99 million each. COMAC plans to deliver the rest of the orders within the next 2 years. At China's biggest air show in November, COMAC secured orders from 7 leasing firms for 300 planes. By late 2022, COMAC had received 305 orders for the C919 in China. Boeing had only received 116 for its 737 series according to a report from the Mercator Institute for China Studies. COMAC Deputy General Manager Zhang Yujin said in January the company had received more than 1,200 orders for the jet. China Eastern Airlines received the C919 in December. More than 100 hours of test flights will take place in 11 cities. The flight validation process started on December 26. The C919 will receive confirmation of operational safety, maintenance reliability, and support capabilities. Requirements are expected to be met in the spring. COMAC anticipates reaching an annual manufacturing capacity of 150 aircraft within 5 years. The C919 is China's first domestically produced large passenger jet. It is the first of its kind to be developed in the country in the last 30 years. Flight tests will ensure the plane is safe and reliable for commercial operation. China's homegrown passenger jet, the C919, could break the duopoly of Boeing and Airbus in the domestic market and beyond. The size of China's aviation market, strong industrial policy and a sector dominated by state-owned companies gives the C919 an edge to advance the country's strategic objectives in aviation. Boeing's China business has been entangled in souring relations between Beijing and Washington, while the central government has laid out plans for the C919 to gain 10% domestic market share by 2025. Narrow-body jets account for about 60% of all planes produced. Boeing's 737 family is trailing the C919 in new orders in China. Airbus is leading the pack with 565 orders for its A320 in China, suggesting a triopoly. China's airlines are accustomed to operating Western passenger jets, so the move to include C919 in their fleet is gradual. China's big three state-owned airlines have placed 294 orders for Airbus and Boeing planes, but only 20 orders each for the C919. Boeing has only received 116 orders for its 737 series by late 2022. The shift towards China's C919 is gradual due to the airline's familiarity with Western passenger jets. Airbus is dominating the Chinese market with 565 orders for its A320, while Boeing has only received 116 orders for its 737 series. China aims to reduce dependence on foreign technology with the C919. Most parts used for the C919 are imported from foreign manufacturers. COMAC is working to replace some of the foreign parts. Aviation is among the sectors negatively affected by deteriorating China-US relations. Subsidiaries of the Aviation Industry Corporation of China have been added to the U.S. Commerce Department's list of Chinese companies with alleged military ties. U.S. is deeply concerned with China's military-civilian fusion strategy. Key takeaway: China's aviation industry is facing more export control restrictions from the U.S. due to its military-civilian fusion strategy. Thanks for watching the Qian Depth. See you in the next one.